My daughter betrayed me, stole from me, and thought she could get away, but I watched, I waited, and I made her pay, in ways she'll never forget. My name is ZAHA. I'm 55. This is my story. I never imagined this would happen to me. Not after 55 years of working, building, giving everything I had to my family. I believed in trust. I believed in loyalty. I believed that blood meant more than money. I was wrong. Welcome back to your ultimate destination for gripping revenge stories, family betrayals, shocking betrayals, and emotional justice. Subscribe now and join a community, and tell us where you're watching from. Turn on the notification bell for our next story. Are you ready to witness the ultimate payback? Let's get started. It started one evening. I was sitting in my office, the soft hum of the city outside my window, papers strewn across my desk. Bank statements, legal documents, invoices, all things I thought I knew by heart. But that night, something felt wrong. I noticed a transfer I didn't recognize. A withdrawal. Then another. And another. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the arms until my knuckles whitened. My stomach churned. I ran through the numbers again. And again. Every line screamed betrayal. But the room was silent. No one to blame, no one to shout at yet. I had to be sure. Mom, what are you doing up so late? Natalie's voice broke the tension. She appeared at the doorway, holding her coffee cup like she hadn't just been plotting behind my back. Her casual tone made my blood boil. Casual. Calm. As if nothing was happening. As if she were still my little girl. I looked at her, steady, unblinking. Just reviewing the accounts, I said slowly, letting the words hang in the air. Funny, some money seems to have vanished. Convenient, isn't it? Her hand shook slightly around her cup. She laughed nervously, trying to cover it. Mom. It must be a mistake. I wouldn't. I cut her off. Impossible? Or deliberate? The words weren't loud. I didn't need to shout. My calm, measured tone carried all the weight of accusation. And she knew it. Her lips pressed together, eyes darting. She thought she could hide it. But I saw everything. Every hidden account, every illicit transfer, every lie. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her silently. In that silence, the truth sank into both of us. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I didn't need to be. Anger can be sloppy. Anger can be obvious. What I needed was patience. Precision. Strategy. I went through the files again, carefully, deliberately. I traced every transfer back to its source. I wrote notes in the margins, little markers that would matter later. Each one was a thread, and I was weaving the net that would catch her. Natalie shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the papers. She tried to smile, tried to play innocent, but I could see the panic flickering behind her eyes. That tiny flicker of fear. It was mine to cultivate. I didn't speak for a moment. I just let her stew in the silence, imagining her relief that I hadn't exploded, thinking she could charm her way out. But charm doesn't undo betrayal. Nothing does. I finally leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I wouldn't care. You were wrong. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came. Good. Words are dangerous when you're unprepared. I wanted her to feel the weight of her own guilt. To understand that she wasn't just facing a mother scorned. She was facing someone who had spent decades building the power to hold her accountable. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just watched, quietly, as the realization settled over her. And I smiled a little, only in my mind. The game had begun. This wasn't just betrayal. This was the first step in a story of justice that I would write myself. Every act, every move, every confrontation, all under my control. She thought she could betray me and get away with it. But she's about to learn that betrayal meets patience. Subscribe to see how Elizabeth begins her plan of revenge. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. But I knew better than to rush. Revenge isn't about yelling or throwing tantrums. Revenge is a chess game. And I was already 10 moves ahead. Natalie continued her routines, laughing at dinner, texting late at night, pretending everything was normal. She had no idea that every little flicker, every small gesture, was being logged, analyzed, remembered. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she walked past me in the hallway. She thought I didn't see the way her shoulders tensed when she heard me shuffle papers. She thought I didn't notice the flicker of guilt in her eyes when she checked her phone. But I saw everything. Every word, every whisper, every glance, it's all evidence, I told myself, pacing in my study. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor. Each step deliberate. Every thought precise. I was building a record. Not just of the money she had taken, but of her arrogance, her carelessness, her belief that she could outsmart me. Late one night, I caught her on the phone, voice barely above a whisper. Everything's ready. Mom doesn't suspect a thing. I froze, savoring the words. My pulse didn't quicken. I didn't breathe harder. I smiled softly, only in my mind. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she was clever. She didn't understand that the most dangerous predator isn't the one who charges blindly. It's the one who waits. The one who observes. The one who knows every move before it happens. I started subtle changes. Nothing she could notice immediately. Freezing minor accounts. Auditing transfers under the guise of routine checks. Asking casual questions that seemed innocuous. Each small action was a pinprick in her confidence. She didn't know I was testing her reactions, watching the cracks appear in her carefully constructed facade. At night, I sat alone in my office reviewing my notes. Every conversation, every transaction, every misstep meticulously logged. My fingers hovered over the desk, tracing lines on the pages as if marking a map. Each mark was a path leading straight to the moment I would confront her. Natalie tried to act normal, but her unease grew. She started asking questions, innocent ones she thought. Mom, why is the bank asking for these confirmations? Why are auditors calling? I smiled softly, letting the question hang in the air. Just standard procedure. You know how careful I am with finances, I replied. My tone was calm, almost conversational, but underneath, it carried a weight she couldn't escape. Her panic began to show in subtle ways. She would leave her phone on the table, glance at it obsessively, pace a little too much. Each small reaction delighted me, not out of cruelty, but out of satisfaction that the truth was surfacing. Every tiny misstep she made was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. You think you're safe. You think you're clever. But every move you make brings you closer to the consequences you deserve. I whispered to myself. And I meant every word. By the end of the week I knew enough. Enough to move. Enough to corner her. Enough to show her that betrayal is never invisible. And justice is never delayed forever. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is impulsive. I wanted precision, control. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices fully. And so I waited. Calm, patient, watching. Every moment she believed she was free was a moment I savored. I could feel the tension in her footsteps, the hesitation in her voice, the subtle quiver in her eyes. I didn't have to act yet. I only had to wait. The trap is quietly closing. ZAHA is watching, calculating, and preparing her move. Subscribe now. The confrontation is coming. I could feel it in the air, the tension, thick and heavy, like smoke before a storm. I had waited long enough. It was time to speak, to test her, to make her understand that betrayal comes with consequences. The dining room was quiet that evening. The soft clink of cutlery on porcelain, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. Natalie sat across from me, pretending to be calm. I poured myself a glass of water slowly, savoring the silence before breaking it. Do you know how much trust costs? My voice was steady, almost conversational, but underneath, it carried every ounce of warning I could muster. Her eyes flicked up, startled. Mom, what are you talking about? Her voice, usually confident, now trembled just slightly. I leaned forward, letting the words sink in, letting the silence between them do some of the work. Your hidden accounts. Every secret transfer. Every lie. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought you could steal from me without consequences. Her fork trembled in her hand. She set it down and tried to smile. A weak, trembling smile. Mom. I didn't mean. I held up my hand, stopping her before she could utter another excuse. No. Not yet. Listen. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of every stolen dollar, every whispered plan, every betrayal linger between us. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices. Do you understand what you've done? I asked, soft but deadly. Her eyes widened. She looked away, biting her lip. I could see the panic flicker there, the first spark of fear. She had underestimated me. She had believed I would never notice, that I would simply let it slide. But I had noticed. I had observed. I had waited. And now the first move was mine. I stood up and walked slowly around the table, letting my presence fill the room. Every step was deliberate. Every glance calculated. I've been patient. I've watched. I've documented everything. And I've been waiting for you to make a mistake. A single slip. She swallowed hard, trying to form words, but none came. Good. Words are dangerous when you're unprepared. Silence is a weapon. Silence says more than screaming ever could. I stopped behind her chair, close enough for her to feel the weight of my presence. This isn't just about money. This is about trust. Betrayal has a price, Natalie. And it's time you understood what that price is. Her hands shook. Her lips parted. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, but there was none. I had cornered her. And I wanted her to know it. Mom, please, she whispered finally, the word trembling, a ghost of the daughter I once knew. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch. Let her imagination fill the gaps. Fear is more powerful than anger, and right now fear was exactly what she needed to feel. Finally, I spoke, calm and deliberate. Patience, precision, strategy. That's how I play. And trust me, Natalie, this is only the beginning. I sat back down, sipping my water as if nothing had happened, letting her panic stew. The first confrontation was over, but the game had just begun. She had seen my calm, my control. She had felt my authority. And she would remember it every time she thought about her choices. The first confrontation is done. But the battle has only begun. Subscribe to see how Elizabeth continues her calculated path of revenge and justice. After the first confrontation, everything changed. Natalie walked around the house like a ghost, tense, careful, cautious. I let her. Every glance she threw my way, every whispered phone call, every subtle hesitation, it all fed me. I didn't rush. Patience is the most effective weapon. She thought she had survived the first warning, but she had only stepped further into the web I was weaving. Every night, I reviewed my notes. Every transaction, every misstep, every slip of her voice, it was all evidence. I began implementing small, precise changes. Nothing she could notice immediately. A slight restriction on an account. A casual audit inquiry that seemed like routine. A phone call to a bank, asking for clarification, framed as due diligence. Each move was subtle, almost invisible, but it left her off balance. She started noticing things. One morning, she stormed into my office, fake calm plastered across her face. Mom, why is the bank asking for confirmation? Why are auditors calling? Her voice wavered, betraying the panic she tried to hide. I looked up from my papers, calm as ever. Just standard procedure. You know how careful I am with finances, I said smoothly, watching her reaction. Every second of her hesitation, every flicker of fear, it was delicious. She tried to mask it with a smile, but I saw the panic in her eyes. I knew she was calculating, thinking she could find a loophole, a way out. I let her think she had time. Let her sweat in her own guilt. During the week, I noticed her subtle missteps. A misdirected email. A hidden phone call left unanswered. A small ledger error she had made trying to cover her tracks. I recorded everything. I didn't confront her again yet. That would come later, at the perfect moment. For now, she needed to feel unease, uncertainty, and the invisible hand of justice slowly closing in. I also began adjusting her access to certain accounts, quietly and strategically. Just enough to unsettle her, not enough to be obvious. I watched her struggle to reconcile balances, her brow furrowing, frustration mounting. Every small panic was another piece of the trap. One night, I overheard her whisper on the phone. She's noticing. I can't believe she's seeing through everything. I leaned against the doorway, letting her realize she was being observed. My presence was silent, but undeniable. The fear, the frustration, the desperation. It all filled the room like a tangible weight. I thought back to the first confrontation, the moment she realized I knew everything. This week, I was showing her just how much power patience holds. I didn't need shouting, threats, or confrontation. The psychological squeeze was enough. She was unraveling quietly, internally, and I was savoring every second. You thought you could play me. You thought I wouldn't see. But I do. I always see. And now, Natalie, the trap is closing. I whispered to myself, pacing slowly, letting the tension linger. By the end of the week, she was visibly off balance. Her usual confidence was gone. She second-guessed her every move. I had achieved what I wanted. Control. Not through violence, not through rage, but through calm, calculated pressure. Every small restriction, every subtle manipulation, had planted fear and uncertainty in her mind. And I was only getting started. The next confrontation would be decisive. By then, the evidence would be undeniable, the psychological groundwork complete. She would see that every move she made had been observed, recorded, and anticipated. And the full consequences of her betrayal would finally hit. The trap is tightening, and Natalie is beginning to crack. Stay tuned to see ZAHA's calculated plan move closer to justice. Subscribe now. The night had come. I had waited, watched, and prepared. Every detail, every slip, every hidden transfer. Everything was mapped, documented, undeniable. It was time to reveal the truth. Natalie entered my office, pretending to be casual, holding a folder she hoped contained something useful. Her confidence had weakened over the past week, though she tried desperately to hide it. I gestured to a chair. "Sit," I said calmly, voice steady. But underneath, every word carried the weight of truth and inevitability. She sat, hands clasped together, pretending composure. "Mom, is something wrong?" I leaned back, folding my arms, letting her squirm in silence. The quiet was a weapon, one I wielded expertly. Finally, I began. "Natalie, do you know what happens when trust is broken?" Her eyes flickered. She swallowed. "Mom, I raised a hand, stopping her. "No excuses. No lies. Just look at this." I slid the folder toward her. Inside were copies of every account, every hidden transfer, every manipulation she had attempted. Every document meticulously labeled, every movement traceable. The numbers didn't lie. She did. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. Her lips parted, but no words came. I could see the panic building, the realization hitting her fully. "You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought you could steal from me and get away with it. You underestimated me," I said, voice calm but cutting. Her face went pale. "Mom, I didn't." "Don't," I interrupted, voice firm. "Don't start with excuses. The evidence speaks for itself. Every transaction, every hidden move, every lie. You thought you were clever. But I've been watching. I've been waiting. And now you see the consequences." She lowered her eyes, trembling. For the first time, the daughter I had raised looked like someone small, fragile, fearful. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't screaming. I didn't need to. Fear was more potent than anger, and right now, it filled the room entirely. I continued, carefully, deliberately. "You will return what you took. You will make amends. And more importantly, you will understand that betrayal has a price." Her voice shook, almost a whisper. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I held up a hand. Save it. Apologies mean nothing without action. You will prove that you are trustworthy again. Or the consequences will continue. Every move you make from this point on will determine whether redemption is possible." She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I could see the weight of comprehension in her eyes, the full measure of her misjudgment. I leaned forward, voice low but unwavering. "This isn't about revenge for anger. This is about justice. Justice for the trust you broke, the lies you told, the betrayal you attempted. And understand this, I am in control. Every step, every decision, every consequence, you will follow the path I set. Only then will this end." Natalie's shoulders slumped, tears brimming. I didn't offer comfort. I offered clarity, precision, control. This was not about punishment. It was about restoring order, reclaiming what was mine, and teaching a lesson that would not be forgotten. For the first time, she truly understood. The fear, the regret, the vulnerability, it was all there. And I watched it quietly, letting her feel every moment of accountability. The revelation was complete. The first step of justice had been delivered. But this was only the beginning. There were more measures to take, more safeguards to implement. The full restoration of trust and the final resolution would come, but only on my terms. The truth is out, and the first strike of justice has landed. Subscribe now to see how Elizabeth's calculated plan for revenge unfolds completely. The days after the revelation were quiet, but tense. Natalie moved through the house cautiously, her every step measured, her voice careful. She had learned the truth, that betrayal has consequences, but she hadn't yet fully grasped the depth of my control. And I intended to make her understand fully, without a single unnecessary word. I started implementing the measures I had been preparing for weeks. Lawyers, auditors, financial consultants, all quietly activated. Every stolen cent, every hidden transfer, every unauthorized purchase would be traced, accounted for, and corrected. Natalie tried to maintain her composure, but it was slipping. She called me once, feigning concern, asking about some minor discrepancy. I listened carefully, letting her chatter, nodding silently, all the while noting every misstep. She thought she was testing me. I was testing her patience, her awareness, her willingness to confront reality. One afternoon, she approached me feigning calm. "Mom, I've corrected the accounts, everything should be fine now." I looked up slowly, meeting her eyes. "Everything?" I asked softly, deliberately. My tone was calm, but the weight behind it pressed down like a hammer. "Yes, Mom. I've fixed it." I smiled faintly. "Good. Because trust, once broken, isn't restored by words alone. Actions must follow. And I will be watching every single one of yours." I didn't shout. I didn't lecture. I let the quiet, deliberate words sink in. My calmness was far more effective than any outburst could have been. Every word was calculated. Every silence strategic. Natalie could feel it. The gravity of her betrayal, the inevitability of accountability. It all pressed down on her like a tangible force. Over the next few days, the full scope of my plan unfolded. Every unauthorized transfer was reversed. Every financial discrepancy corrected. Natalie returned what she had taken. She contacted the banks, the auditors, the advisors. Each act of restitution was a step toward redemption, and I watched quietly, approving some, correcting others, always maintaining control. At home, I reinstated boundaries. Conversations were direct. Expectations were clear. The psychological hold I had on her was not cruel. It was precise. It was about teaching lessons she could not unlearn, making her fully comprehend the weight of betrayal, and ensuring she would never repeat it. One evening, as the house settled into silence, I walked through the rooms, noting the subtle shifts. Staff treated me with renewed respect, friends acknowledged the change in authority, and Natalie moved quietly, carefully, aware that every action had consequences. I realized then that justice is not always dramatic. It is often quiet, relentless, and precise. You do not need fury to reclaim control. You need strategy, observation, and patience. And in this I had excelled. I sat at my desk, reviewing the final corrected statements. Everything was in order. Every cent accounted for, every betrayal addressed, every lesson delivered. I allowed myself a small smile. Justice had been served, not through anger, not through shouting, but through precision, patience, and a relentless commitment to the truth. Natalie approached me quietly that night. Her voice trembled. "Mom, I understand now. I'm sorry." I looked at her, steady, composed. "Apologies matter little without change. But I see that you're beginning to understand. That is the first step." For the first time, she looked genuinely humbled, aware that her actions had consequences beyond her initial comprehension. And I knew that this was only possible because I had remained calm, patient, and deliberate throughout. Justice was delivered. Betrayal had been addressed. Control restored. And yet, there remained a quiet satisfaction in knowing that every lesson had been internalized, That trust had been re-earned not through fear alone, but through understanding the weight of every choice. Justice has been served, but Elizabeth's journey isn't over. Stay tuned for the next chapter as she rebuilds, restores, and ensures betrayal can never happen again. Subscribe now. The house was quiet that morning. Too quiet. I walked through the halls slowly, each step measured, listening to the subtle sounds of life that had returned after the storm of betrayal and justice. Natalie was moving cautiously, respectful now, aware that trust is not a gift freely given. It is earned, maintained, and constantly reinforced. I sat in my study, staring out at the city skyline. The sun reflected off the windows of distant buildings, but I wasn't seeing the view. I was seeing the weeks behind me, the tension, the patience, the careful observation, and finally, the execution of justice. The taste of victory was not bitter or vengeful. It was precise, clean, and controlled. I picked up a pen, flipping through my notes. Every transaction traced, every conversation logged, every subtle misstep documented. It wasn't just about catching Natalie. It was about understanding the anatomy of betrayal. How a mind could rationalize stealing from someone who had given them everything. How guilt can be buried under arrogance. How power can be disguised as entitlement. My thoughts drifted to the quiet moments, the ones nobody saw. The nights spent alone reviewing records, the careful crafting of my approach, the mental rehearsals of confrontations. Each step had been deliberate. Each pause strategic. I realized that revenge, true revenge, isn't about anger. It's about clarity, precision, and control. And in that clarity, I had found a strange satisfaction, a calm resolve that surpassed the initial sting of betrayal. Natalie approached quietly, knocking softly on the open door. "Mom, may I speak with you?" Her voice was tentative, respectful, almost reverent. I gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, then lowered herself onto the chair. I've been thinking," she began slowly. "About everything. About what I did. About the trust one broke. I don't know how to make it right." I leaned back, fingers laced, watching her closely. "Making it right isn't about words," I said softly. "It's about understanding. Understanding that every action has consequences, and that trust, once broken, takes effort to rebuild. Do you understand that now?" Her eyes welled with tears. She nodded slowly. "I do, Mom. I understand. I will do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I never want to feel the weight of your disappointment again." I studied her carefully. There was humility there, yes, but also the awareness of her previous mistakes. And in that awareness, I felt a measure of relief. Not because I had won, but because the lesson had landed. The fire of betrayal had cooled into the warmth of reflection. I finally spoke, voice calm but firm. "This isn't about fear. It's about respect. Respect for truth, for family, and for the bonds we choose to honor. You will need to demonstrate that respect, day by day, in every action, in every decision." Natalie lowered her gaze, swallowing hard. "I will. I promise. I will not fail again." I nodded slowly. The weight in the room shifted. The tension that had defined our lives for weeks was finally easing. The betrayal was acknowledged, justice was delivered, and reflection had begun. I allowed myself a small smile, not of triumph, but of calm satisfaction. I realized that the storm of rage and betrayal had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. I had not only reclaimed control but had created an opportunity for growth, understanding, and renewed trust. For the first time, I felt the quiet joy of resolution, not loud, not dramatic, but profound. Revenge had been carefully administered, justice served, and the path forward clear. Elizabeth has seen the truth, delivered justice, and begun to heal. But the final act of reconciliation and resolution is coming. Subscribe to witness the conclusion of her journey. The morning sun spilled softly through the living room windows, bathing the house in warm light. I watched Natalie move carefully around the kitchen, preparing breakfast with a newfound attentiveness. She no longer rushed, no longer assumed, no longer acted without thought. Every movement was measured, deliberate, a reflection of the lesson she had finally absorbed. I leaned against the doorway, observing silently. This was the quiet aftermath of justice, the fragile moment before trust could be fully rebuilt. There was no grand speech today, no dramatic confrontation. Just small acts, subtle gestures, a slow return to order. Natalie noticed me watching and hesitated, then offered a tentative smile. "Good morning, Mom." Her voice was soft, tinged with humility. I returned the smile, calm, composed. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" "Reflective," she admitted, stirring the coffee slowly, as if each motion required concentration. "I've been thinking about everything. About what I did, what I risked, and what you endured. I never realized how much patience and control you had. I was reckless. I betrayed not just your trust, but the very foundation of our family." I nodded, allowing her words to settle. Reflection is powerful when it is genuine. It shapes future actions, informs choices, and prevents history from repeating itself. "Actions speak louder than words," I said, voice calm but deliberate. "It's not enough to apologize verbally. You must show it through behavior, day by day, decision by decision. Only then can trust be rebuilt." She nodded slowly, eyes downcast. "I understand, Mom. I will work to make amends. I don't want to ever hurt you or the family again. I want to regain what I lost, step by step." I watched her carefully, gauging sincerity. Her tone, her demeanor, her small gestures, all indicated she was beginning to internalize the weight of her actions. Not through fear, but through understanding. Over the next few days, subtle changes became evident. She returned misplaced files, corrected previous mistakes, and handled family responsibilities with care she had previously ignored. Each act was deliberate, but each act carried a sincerity I could feel. Trust, once fractured, can be rebuilt, but only when the lessons are learned fully, and Natalie was learning. That evening, I invited her to sit with me in the study. No accusations, no silent judgments, just conversation. "Natalie," I began, "the past is not erased, but it can inform the future. Your actions have consequences, and you have taken the first steps to acknowledge them. That is why we are here, rebuilding together." She looked up at me, eyes glistening, and nodded. "I am ready, Mom. I want to earn your trust again. I want to be part of this family in a way that is honest, responsible, worthy of you." I allowed myself a quiet smile. This was the reconciliation I had envisioned. Not forced, not shallow, but genuine. The storm of betrayal had passed. What remained was understanding, accountability, and a path toward renewed respect. I reached across the desk, placing a hand lightly over hers. "Then let this be the beginning. From now on, every choice, every action, will define how we move forward. And I will guide this process, because leadership and accountability are what restore balance after chaos." She squeezed my hand, a small but meaningful gesture. It was acknowledgement, commitment, and a quiet apology all in one. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had hung over our home seemed to lift. I realized then that revenge had not been about punishment alone. It had been about restoration. About teaching lessons so deeply that they would never be forgotten. About rebuilding bonds stronger than before, founded on respect, accountability, and clarity. And in that quiet morning light, with Natalie beside me, I felt the first real sense of peace. Not triumphant, not dramatic, but profound, lasting, and earned. Reconciliation has begun, and lessons have been learned. Subscribe now to see the final resolution, and how ZAHA restores balance and peace to her family. The house felt different that morning. Light streamed through the windows, but it wasn't just the sun illuminating the rooms. It was clarity, order, and balance finally restored. Natalie moved around with purpose, but not in fear. With respect, responsibility, and understanding. I watched her quietly from the doorway, savoring the moment. This was the calm after the storm of betrayal and calculated justice. Weeks of observation, patience, and strategic moves had led to this point. The house felt lighter. The air no longer carried tension but the quiet hum of restored trust. Natalie approached me with a folder. "Mom, everything has been corrected. Every account, every transfer, every detail. I've done what you asked." I nodded slowly, assessing her sincerity. "I see that. And more importantly, I see the effort behind it. Actions matter. Words are cheap. Deeds prove character. Today, you've shown both accountability and understanding. She let out a quiet sigh. Relief mingled with humility. I understand now. Betrayal. It changes everything. And I never want to feel the weight of losing your trust again. I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. That weight she spoke of was exactly what she needed to carry, until she had proven herself worthy. And now, after weeks of careful navigation, she had begun to bear it with grace. I took a step closer. Trust can be rebuilt, but it takes vigilance. It takes humility. It takes awareness that every choice has consequences. And you've shown me that you're ready to start earning that trust again. Her eyes glistened, but this time not with fear. With understanding. I promise, Mom. I will not fail you again. The past weeks flashed through my mind. The confrontation, the subtle manipulations, the careful observation, the night when the evidence was finally revealed. Every step, every moment had led to this. Resolution, restoration, and a family beginning anew. I let the silence settle between us, letting it carry weight. Silence is a powerful teacher. Natalie understood that now. She had seen the consequences of arrogance, the power of patience, and the inevitability of accountability. Zaha, she began hesitantly, I want to thank you. For everything. Not just for teaching me, but for giving me a chance to make things right. I met her gaze, calm and steady. The chance was always there. But learning to use it wisely, that was up to you. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge had not been about humiliation or cruelty. It had been about restoring order, reclaiming control, and teaching lessons that were necessary for growth. Justice was not just about punishment, it was about transformation. I extended my hand. Natalie took it without hesitation. It was more than a handshake. It was acknowledgement, reconciliation, and a quiet promise. A bridge had been rebuilt, stronger than before, founded on respect, awareness, and accountability. I stepped back, allowing space, letting her feel the full weight of the lessons learned. This was final. Not because she was forgiven in a casual sense, but because justice had been delivered completely, precisely, and effectively. Betrayal had been addressed. Trust could now be rebuilt on solid ground. I watched her move away, completing the tasks that had once caused chaos. The house hummed with quiet energy, order restored. And I felt a deep, internal satisfaction. Not of triumph over another, but of clarity, control, and the balance finally restored. This was the resolution I had envisioned from the beginning. The storm of betrayal had passed. Justice had been administered. Reflection had occurred. Reconciliation had begun. And the family, our family, was finally whole again. The story of betrayal, revenge, and justice has reached its resolution. Zaha reclaimed control, delivered justice, and restored her family. Subscribe to witness more powerful stories of courage, cunning, and accountability. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.